welcome back, everybody, to a bonus content episode of The Top Shelf. This is following up our premiere episode on Twitch, which has at this point hit YouTube. So this is showing up just in line with it. I wasn't able to get the fantastic Grant Howitt, the creator of Heart, or at least one of, onto our stream with us. So we're going to ask him some questions, post the conversation we had at the end of the stream about how it went, how the mechanics felt, what were what were our first impressions from a group of people who had never played it before and who I threw into objectively a fairly macabre setting to just be immersed in without having a whole lot of context. So thank you so much for being part of this, Grant. I'm glad that we could.
Hello there. Hi.
Some
My apologies for not turning up on stream. I believe it was about 4 a.m. for me.
Yeah, that's
So I'm in London, so I'm like I don't think I'd provide much insight. Wouldn't be too sparkling at that point.
Fair enough. No, I had we had Chris McDowell on, and he ran a game for us at our U.S. Mountain Standard Times, and it was.
He's like Chris. Chris started out as a professional game designer about a year ago. Obviously, he's been designing. He's been doing it much longer than that. He did Into the Odd, but I remember I was there at the discussion where he's like, "I'm going professional," so I can see he's still hungry and still on that grind. Whereas I'm very much settling into the plateau of my career.
He still has hope.
Yeah.
No, we can do this. I have the time.
Yeah. No, absolutely not.
Well, cool. No, so there are two names primarily listed on Heart. Is that correct?
That's correct. Yes, me and Chris.
Yeah. So what parts did you personally tackle? Like, how did you divide up, or what did that mean?
So, what that means, Chris and I are best friends, and also like we were the best man at each other's wedding. We went to university together. We've been writing games together professionally and non-professionally since 2007. I want to say 2006, maybe a long time. No, 2005. We did a live action version of popular ITV children's show Nightmare, where you would know it as an American. It was an incredible show.
Yeah, I can't say that I've ever heard of it.
It used very early green screen technology, and what they would do, they used to put a helmet on a child. And this was the helmet of truth, which would shield you from the illusions of the dungeon. But it was just a full face helmet that had no holes in it, so they could only see their feet, which meant they couldn't see the fact that they were in a green screen room. And so you had other children give them instructions like step left, step right, grab the apple, that sort of thing. Except we did it by putting a bin on someone's head, just in a spare room in a university sports hall. We had blade traps made out of tables, and yes, we did that in 2005. Chris and I have been writing games together for a long time. In terms of the division, generally what happens, the rules, he and I will work on together, and we'll sort of we'll hash things out as we go through. But generally, if you read a word in a book that we published, I wrote it, and Chris gave it the thumbs up. But Chris is far more involved in mechanics. He's far more involved in balance, and I like to think of him as he kicks stupid ideas out of my mouth. I have some really terrible ideas, and Chris is there as kind of a choke or a restraint to stop me from really ruining our business. I couldn't do what I do without him, certainly.
Fair enough. No, I mean I think that's super important to have around in general, is just somebody to pull the brakes on whatever it is you want to do. It's not gonna work out. Okay, so first off, because I have had the book for a little while. I bought one of the limited edition, like the.
Yeah, I've seen the picture.
The red ones, they're gorgeous.
So nice, aren't they?
Yeah, so I have a thing for, and the reason the show is called what it is because I have just become obsessive about collecting. I don't want to call them independent because I feel like Rowan Rookwood Deckard is not quite.
No, we're indie.
Does that considered indie? Okay.
We're one of the bigger UK indie publishers, certainly. but that's not a big pond for us to be a small fish in.
Fair enough.
Sorry, yeah, it's big.
Okay,
Yeah.
so I have become obsessive about collecting indie tabletop RPGs, and I have probably 45 to 60 games just
That's nice.
sitting on the top shelf of my wall over here, and it's everywhere between like 3-page zines to big hardcover stuff like your book. But I had it for a little while, and at the inception of this idea, which is actually when I was playing a game with Chris, I started reading through it, and I remember like the art was incredible. The layout for it and the way that it was worded struck me very much so. What, I mean, where, and I guess by extension this comes into Spire as well, but more leaning towards Heart specifically. What struck as the inspiration for this game? Like, because it's very specific. I feel like the Heart itself is a pretty niche, or collected thematically as far as a book is concerned.
Annihilation, the Jeff Vandermeer novel and Natalie Portman film.
Okay.
I read Annihilation about 3 years ago. I don't read a lot of books. I get distracted quite easily. I should read more. I really ought to read more. And like I'll read a role playing game by sort of like leafing through a PDF on my computer. Like yeah, cool, yeah. But I read Annihilation, and I was really struck with the beauty of it and the terror, like the attempts to explain an alien invasion, which happened very slowly, and also in terms of the unreality of the thing. I found gorgeous, and that's Heart, really. The idea that there is another reality trying to sneak in underneath our own. As far as Spire goes, that's really just Necromunda from Warhammer, except I put elves in it and set it in the past rather than the future. I've always been obsessed with 40k. I think I started playing Warhammer when I started buying models when I was 11. I think I've maybe played Warhammer like 15 times in my life. But I have shelves of models. My desk is covered in that I'm currently converting little toy soldiers now. I am fascinated with the world of excellent.
Yeah.
Oh, is that the new Gaskell?
Yep. So that's Gaskell.
Gorgeous model.
Yeah, he's stunning. So I got into it about 3 months ago.
Oh man.
Yeah.
There's so much for you there. That's wonderful. It's so exciting.
So I just finished. I have about 2,100 points worth of orcs at the moment.
Wow.
Well,
that's lockdown, right? I guess it's not like you got much else on.
Yeah, that is the crux of it. But yeah, I started getting into it just recently. And my buddy was like, "You have to come play. You have to start collecting models and things." I have collected a full army because I was invested in playing. I have collected a full army before he has even finished his, because he is obsessive about painting everything.
Yeah.
Everything is parade ready in his army, and it's insane.
No, I've got to convert. I cannot. I've never made a full functional army. Every single model has to be unique in some way. It's foolish, useless. It doesn't work for the rules. Like, most of the models on my shelf would not be allowed anywhere near a competition table because they simply do not represent an existing unit. But I've always found the grandiose nature of Warhammer really fascinating. The fact that everything's huge and overblown, and like it's this galaxy-wide war, and everyone's fighting each other, and all the weapons are massive, mainly so you can see them on the table, and everything's very colorful in that way, And I like to think that Spire. So between Warhammer and also Unknown Armies. Which is a gorgeous role-playing game. I think it was the first role-playing game I read where I was like, oh, it isn't just wizards. Oh, well, it is about wizards. It isn't just like Dungeons and Dragons and things. It really sort of opened my eyes on the idea that you could have a postmodern magic system. And so if you take the idea of a hive city and you take the idea of postmodern magic, that's just Spire. Just sort of, I'd like that's because they wouldn't let me write Unknown Armies or Warhammer, so I did Spire. I think.
Well, and I saw that too. I actually thought, I don't know if you play a whole lot of video games and things, but it immediately struck me a little bit Dishonored-esque.
Yes,
as well.
Yes, there's a lot there in terms of that.
And then art-wise for Heart, and I think a lot of the things that really reached out to me when I went to buy it is that I became obsessive with Darkest Dungeon for about
Yeah, absolutely.
3 months, where I played just gobs of that game.
Mm. We the reason why part of the reason why we were interested in hiring Felix Miol, the chap who did all the art for us, because his art looks a lot like Darkest Dungeon. And we were like, oh yeah, well, I mean, we're trying to basically do Darkest Dungeon the game, so why not? And he was significantly cheaper than hiring the Darkest Dungeon guy as well. I guess, I don't know. I wasn't going to. I forget the name of the guy. I wasn't going to approach the dude who did Darkest Dungeon. But Felix, I will also say, like, Felix has this. There's something slightly more involved, slightly more granular, slightly more detailed. It's actually one of the things which we've done in combination between Heart and Spire, in comparison between Heart and Spire, sorry, is the art in Spire is very, it's by a chap called Adrian Stone, and that's very brisk. It's very hard edged, lots of right angles, lots of abstraction. So the idea is that you can look at yourself, like you can look at the picture and project into the image. Like AD leaves a lot of stuff unsaid in the pictures, and Felix does a much more like grimy, very high detailed stuff, which really works for sort of the obsessive stories of Heart. The fact that it's about the characters and it's about their progression through the world, rather than Spire, which is much more about the revolution, as it were. But it's been an interesting challenge trying to do art management for a book as a man who can't draw and has never done art management before. It's been weird to sort of stumble into this career and try and work it out as you go.
I can only imagine. I mean, especially because at that point you're reconciling, or it feels like there would be some level of reconciling the art between both worlds, because they're both connected too, and giving them their own flavors and what they're working on, but still making them feel like the same thing.
We keep it vague. We keep our canon very vague on purpose. One of the things which doesn't really work very well for role-playing games. Part of the fun of a role-playing game, part of the thing which people find very exciting, especially like in the realm of big books, like as you were saying before, like on the hardcover, 200, 300 page end of the spectrum. People love having these encyclopedias of fictional worlds. You can say, oh, this monster is this strong, and this place is over here, and it's this sort of it's a world which you can immerse yourself in. But that sounded really hard to write. So instead we like this is back at Spire. Like, we don't map Spire. There is a map of Spire, and it is expressly non-canonical. Like within the fiction of Spire, because I'm looking at that, I've got it on my wall. The maps of Spire were done by a blind gnoll who has never left his cave in El Marah. That is the official line. And we found that the second when you start introducing canon, when you start introducing timelines, when you start introducing all these things, that there's much more no involved in that, and there's much more like a game saying, well, you can't do this because that street isn't there. You can't do this because Elfie would never act in that way. And we can have it as much vaguer and much looser, which really fits a game like Heart, where there's no map and you have to make it up as you go along. We've tried to, I think especially with Heart, we tried to lean into the idea that role-playing games are an immersive, improvised thing. And any game is created by the dungeon master, by the games master, and experienced by the players, and that sort of rolls forward. But the world doesn't exist until the games master speaks it aloud. It's merely potential. And something with Heart is we wanted to try and get the idea of a dungeon crawl and lean into it. And so the idea of the Heart making its building itself around you in the image of your desires, the idea of the Heart being sentient and trying to give you what you want, tying back into the idea of beats, where we've tried to marry the fiction of the world with the realities of playing a role-playing game, because it can be very hard to try and maintain a perfect fictional world if your players know more about it than you do, which is why I ran one session of Discworld role-playing and then never any more.
Yeah. You know what? I mean, that's really fair, though, because one of the things, and and I'm gonna go back to it because I think at this point it is my favorite or one of my favorite RPGs I've ever played. But Electric Bastion Land was my first experience into that, and the idea that his Chris's map in that is just you have Bastion and then Deep Country and then the Underground, and they're just little rectangles, and it's just the existence of this. It's saying, okay, here's your relation points, but that's really not up to me. That's up to you and the table and what you're doing with the game at that point. And I have run 5 or 6 different sessions of Bastionland for friends now, and every single one of them are vastly their own game, and none of them make any sense to each other because it doesn't matter. Like this is its own self-contained story in this world, and what we see of that doesn't need to connect elsewhere. And I think that kind of game building is very cool. So I saw that from Hart's perspective too, especially in the writing and the kind of the beginning couple pages of the book and how you explain, what you wanted the book to be. So with that then, what started Hart? Actually, let me get more specific.
Money.
Fair enough.
We needed money.
As one does.
And we decided that we could write. So we asking for from a mechanical point of view, or from
so
inception?
what I was going to ask that, and I realized that the way that I phrased it was too vague.
Okay.
When you go to design the game, when you start with mechanics, what began that process? What to you determined I'm going to use this dice pool with these static skill trees versus a roll under system or this? Like, what made you make those decisions?
So primarily Spire made us do that decision because we'd already written the resistance system for Spire, and it worked very well. I think I was keen to have a different setting, different mechanics for Heart. But Chris and Mary, so Mary's the third partner in Rowan, Rook, and Deckard. They are the Rowan. I'm the Rook. That Chris and Mary both agreed and talked me around to the idea that by using the same system, the same core system, it would make it feel much more cemented within the same world. It would allow a measure of translation and understanding between the two things. We ended up overhauling the resistance system as we wrote it, but with Heart, it was basically already decided for us in that we were going to use the resistance system that we'd already written for Spire. And what we wanted to do was expand that in a way which made it a bit more combat-y, to have some more rules for exploration, some more rules for equipment. There are fewer rules for, say, for bonds and relationships. There's far fewer abilities which allow the players to, say, like craft the world in the same way that Spire did. Spire was the abilities in Spire were more designed to give the players a sensation of being part of the city, and like having grown up in the city or come here and already having a reputation to give them the agency of doing this. Whereas in Heart, it's much more giving people the ability to pick which nightmare they want to go into and kill it. As far as the mechanics of Spire goes, the official the in-house document we have, we got up to 16 drafts of the rules. And I think it's 16. I can't quite remember because on the final document before we went to playtest, it's Spire draft fuck 1001, because we couldn't remember how many drafts we've done. It was like it used D4s at one point. There was a playing card system. For about 3 editions, I was obsessed with it, with a mechanic of control, where it would be like controlling a situation. So it was much more like, for a while it was about espionage. There was much more fieldcraft in it. There was the skill black bag, which we had for a while. And that grew and evolved into something which is effectively, I think, Apocalypse World, but with only one move in it. And you can, like, that, the consult, the little D10 table, consult this, see what happens. Everything in the game goes through that. And then, like, you've got like I suppose fallout and stress are slightly off to the side, but with those two things, the game ticks forward. We were happy with that, and I think like with any sort of collaboration, and honestly, any sort of solo work, you never release the perfect game. You release the game that's ready. You release the game that is ready to be played. And I'm certainly happy with what we've done with Spire. I'm really happy with what we've done with Heart as well, in terms of reducing the overall administration, the overall upkeep, trying to keep it much more focused around like this moment-to-moment understanding of the rules, rather than something which involves a bit more bookkeeping. And I'm interested to see where we can go from here as well in terms of resistance system, because like I've got some ideas for a diceless system. Not dice. Yeah, no, not diceless. Numberless. I want to see if I can remove numbers from the game. Yeah.
Rolling traditional dice, or would you guys be printing your own dice specific to the system?
I would be rolling traditional dice, possibly for. That's the thing. So I had the idea on the bus back from Gen Con last year. And we just finished. I think we'd had like 6 playtest sessions of Heart at Gen Con, and we were getting ready to go to Kickstarter. It was like, Chris, I've had this great idea. It's like, cool, shut up. We have to kickstart the book. Don't rewrite every rule in the book, please.
We have a different thing first.
Yeah.
Okay.
So that's the thing. I'm happy with the way how it goes. I think that the way I find it interesting that the book is divided up into the ideas in the book are divided up into like low, medium, high, or minor, major, severe, critical in that way. And so I think we could probably get rid of numerical stress and just have those words instead. But I don't know. We've got a while still.
Okay. No, that's interesting. I feel like the insight there is very cool, because the top shelf, or how the series is going to evolve, because this was our inaugural episode. So we just began everything. It is designed for my obsessive self, who is collecting tabletop RPGs, to be able to show these to more people.
And it's an excuse to wear a suit as well.
It is. It is also an excuse to wear a suit and drink on camera. We were all just like casually sipping on something the whole time. But
nice. That's good.
Yeah, keeps us relaxed. But no, the big point of it, is to be able to show off more independent games. I started playing Dungeons and Dragons 2 years ago. My first name, Karoman, came from a Dungeons and Dragons novel. My dad named me after a character, so it's always been around. Yeah. And I was convinced up until about 6-7 months ago that was the only system that you needed. I could play anything in Dungeons and Dragons, and nobody could convince me otherwise. I could convert thematically, whatever.
Wouldn't say that too loudly on Twitter, mate.
Yeah, no, it's not good. I have vastly changed my tune, because now I'm kind of advocating for all of everything else. Now there's a game for anything. Whatever story you want to tell, you can find a game for it. So we usually run a game, and then post that we have this conversation about, or at least we're going to, because we've only had one episode, but we're going to have these conversations about how they work, how they feel, because I think that's just as important from a new player perspective. And this one specifically, the post conversation about this was less about the gameplay itself, because once we got into it, it was phenomenal. It was so much fun to play, and it worked really, really smoothly. I found myself, and maybe it's just how I run games, but I found myself having a tougher time with it in certain spots, because I felt like I was referencing back to like Fallout tables, or referencing back to certain things more often than I would like, because I very much like to. I have the book, I know the rules. If I need it, it's over here. So as a game master, that was a little bit of a shift, but it wasn't. I mean, it wasn't bad. It was just different. I understand that tables and things are there's a lot of systems that are even heavier in that by far. But the big thing that came up was Heart was fairly difficult to get into as a new player who did not have anybody else to walk you through it. Like now I could teach anybody and it would be super simple. Like the game itself is very easy, but the way that it was written kind of across the table from all of my players was this was fairly arduous to kind of build a character and understand how this is supposed to work. And like most of it was got, but there was just like little tiny things that I think held it up. And I'm curious to know, because you'd already written a system, or you'd already written Spire and you'd already built that. I'm curious to know if Heart was built for, or at least in part built for people who had already played Spire, and it was kind of, if this one kind of leaned off of it, and maybe that's where kind of the, more of the hand-holding was in the Spire core rulebook as far as player creation. But
I think that's just a failing on our part, honestly. Heart's I'm gonna use the word postmodern again. Heart's postmodern in a lot of ways. In this approach to rules, in that say all rules focus through the characters and enemies get as many attacks per round as there are players, depending on what you're rolling, etc. There's the way in which one interacts with the world, as opposed to say your Dungeons and Dragons, your World of Darkness. It's much more abstracted, certainly.
it is.
And I think that on Dungeons and Dragons, you sort of have everything written down on your sheet, and once you understand that, okay, I roll a d20 and I'm looking to hit a number, and the number is made up by the GM, but it's probably 15. That's basically the core of the game, and a lot of the stress in, I suppose, a lot of the mechanics in Dungeons and Dragons are handled up front and loaded in the book, and so the GM and the players absorb those, and then the game ticks forward. And with Spire and with Heart and with also a lot of the one-page games I write as well, those mechanisms simply aren't there. We trusted the GM. I think actually Electric Bastion Line does this quite well as well. They trusted the GM in terms of just make it up, because you're going to be making it up anyway. And the bits which we focus on are ends rather than means, I think, and that can be quite challenging. So we don't have a strength score, but we have a kill skill, and the strength score is most commonly used for murder in Dungeons and Dragons, but it can also be used for all these other things. It also plugs into these things, and so by having a more stripped down, abstracted system, I think that if you are coming into this new, that could be quite challenging, certainly. And I think that there's a few things to get your head around. There are a few unusual things, like the way that Fallout works. That is abstracted in Dungeons and Dragons. So hit points. Hit points are, everyone understands hit points. Everyone's played a computer game or what have you. Everyone knows that, I do 3 damage and I take 4 damage, and everyone can understand these numbers going up and down. And in D&D, that's the only kind of numerical problem you can have, aside from maybe losing stats and stuff. But whereas in Spire and Heart and anything else which runs off the Resistance system, but also in Apocalypse World and a lot more of these newer indie games, being discovered by the guards is mechanically the same as getting shot. Casting a spell is mechanically the same as buying an expensive dinner to try and get the mayor on the side. And it requires you to go into this, it requires you to enter this headspace, which is far less, my character's going to try this thing, and then we'll use the simulator to see what happens. And it's, I'm going to try and tell the story. I'm going to try and do these things to achieve these means. And it puts players in much more of a, as a word I learned 7 years ago now, 8 years ago, story positioning, which I found really interesting. And I was playing with a new group. We're playing Cyberpunk many moons ago, and we're playing with a new group. And we had this woman join the group, and she was a bit quiet, and she was a bit like awkward to wasn't joining in with things. And another player said, "Hey, my character's going to go and do this. Does your character want to come with me, or do you want to bring your character?" And it was completely like power level, gaming wise, terrible idea. Really, really bad plan. The two of them shouldn't have been together. But he saw that player wasn't having fun, and he wanted to try and bring her into the story. And I think that one of the things which story games give you the capacity to do and actively encourage from the players, and we try to write them to push this, is to have that level of engagement awareness, metagaming, I suppose, on the part of the players, not just the GM. So everyone is in essence acting a bit like an NPC. They're always trying to push the story forward. They're always trying to go in interesting directions, and not just I want to try and get the most gold out of this room.
That feels
And
a
I
lot
can
of
see her.
yeah. No, I love that perspective because that feels a lot like where, or at least that's what I gathered from reading about how the beats work, how the active beats work. Is
Yes.
the idea is you have to, or not you have to, I guess, but you get to as a player where you don't in Dungeons and Dragons, save for these abstracted conversations you might have with your dungeon master. But the book itself actually encourages you to say, I want to accomplish these things this session with my character. And if I can push the story forward, or if I can be a part of these things, let me,
Yeah.
and we can use those to improve my character, because then I feel accomplished, but also I know what to expect out of the story that session, or at least I have
And
some idea. That's very cool.
and not just in terms of I want to achieve this thing, my character has this ongoing goal,
Mm.
but quite a common beat is I take X fallout. I get hurt in this way, and you're directly saying to the games master, "Hey, hurt me, daddy," and it's a really clean way of doing. It's not something which you'd normally have in a role playing game where you'd say, "Take this specific kind of damage, take this specific kind of harm." And it's definitely not something your character would want. And I think that sort of positioning yourself slightly out of the head of your character, especially if you've not done a lot of role playing before, especially like that can be quite challenging. We try to write games so if this is someone's first game, they'll be okay. But it's certainly not specifically written for that. When I was waffling about the postmodern stuff before, like this is, I'm loath to say this is an advanced game for serious role players, but it's kind of relying on you having done the normal role playing first, so you can like, oh, this guy's full of bees. That should be exciting rather than what? Huh?
No. Okay, so couple notes then. The first, that is the quintessential conversation piece through the Discord and TPK is the deep apiarist and their phenomenal ability to just be full of bees. There was, and one of the players, they actually, I think they tweeted at you asking if you were okay earlier this week.
Yes, I was like, no, absolutely not.
Yeah, no.
Fundamentally, no. I'm on pills for that, but I'm glad you like the
game. Was that you also wrote Honey Heist?
Yes.
Which has a good number of bees in that as well. Which I guess there's not really a question to, because the question is, do you just have a thing for bees? Is it?
I love bees. Question. They're great.
Yeah, I mean,
no, they're wonderful things. Yeah, they pollinate plants. They make honey. They're cute. You can keep them in a little house. There's all kinds of fun mythology around bees as well, like small town English mythology. Like, for example, this is a fun little thing. If someone dies in a house, or if someone gets married, or if someone's born, you have to go and tell the bees. Otherwise, they'll leave. The bees like the queen likes to feel as though she is part of the family, and like there's certain parts of England where they'll still dress the hives in mourning clothes after the homeowner has died.
Oh, that's my favorite thing, and also I'm gonna have to keep that in mind now because my grandfather has a number of beehives in his backyard.
Well,
so
tell him.
Yep.
Yeah. Bees are great. I'm into them.
No, I think it's. I don't know what it was about that, but I think the deep apiarist specifically is a very good indicator of the specificity and kind of flavor that was put into Heart. Because it is the most bizarre of everything. The Vermissian Knight, the Vermissian Knight, very much feels like, steampunk Mad Max Paladin. You can kind of draw little things from everybody, but this deep apiarist is its own thing entirely, and it, from your perspective, or from what you had just mentioned of, loath to say it's for, it's advanced game or for people who have already role played. I think there is a level of that where it definitely comes across as this is a step, maybe not above, because I'm loath to compare
definitely towards weird.
Yeah, it's absolutely towards weird, but it's also separated just enough from the norm that you kind of are assumed to understand the norm at least.
Yes.
Because otherwise you
Yeah.
can't take, a normal thing like a cavern and it's like, all right, well, now let's make it fleshy and fill it with, these horrible things that, you know, wouldn't be there if we couldn't explain the base of what it was supposed to be. Which is very cool.
It's high weird, certainly.
It is high weird.
And I think like what we were going for is the heart is what if high fantasy, but it was a bit shit. And I quite like the way that nothing quite works and everyone's tired all the time, and it's got like shoddy and like badly made extra dimensions like sutured onto the side, and everything's kind of breaking, and everyone's just doing their best. I really like games where everyone's just doing their best, and that's what I wanted to. I think like Heart was a great place for me to sort of explore that, and play around with the idea that you could have a flying castle, but it's crashed, or like goblins have stolen it and they've built shanties onto it and they're stealing bits of other flying buildings so it can stay afloat and it's scraping along the ground. I really like the idea of things breaking and going wrong, but people still trying to make it work.
Heart is just 2020 to present. It's just so no, you definitely get that feel too, and when I was explaining character creation to the players, from how I understood it, one of the things that came up was, here's these here's the world is people running or keeping away from the bullshit from up top, or trying to search out answers for something that they may not even know the answer to, and you're just kind of at something. You don't know what it is. You may not know what it is, but you're trying to get to something, and that kind of drive to dig down or get deeper through the heart without knowing what the heart is creates, I guess, that context of the obsessive kind of broken world that it puts itself in, which is very cool. One of our characters had a specific qualm or curiosity towards the character creation. He played a junk mage, and
I've never heard the singular qualm before.
Qualm?
That's great. I've only ever heard it as like I've got no qualms about this. I've never like trying to imagine an individual qualm. Go on. So junk mages, qualm. Yes, a single qualm. Junk mages.
What was your decision? You named something. You specifically put the word mage on junk mage, and there was an immediate assumption going into it that there would be a spell book or a large cast of something to choose from, and then you get to it, and this skill tree is the same structurally as every other character. What was your kind of thought towards character creation? I have not read Spire, so if it's the same in Spire...
It's the same in Spire as well.
Okay, so same question to both.
The reason why, so initially we had a spell book. We had Spire is very much a game about gods and a game about religion, really. Chris and I are fascinated by the idea. both of us atheists, but we're interested in belief structures. We're fascinated by the rites and the rituals around it. And so we wanted to do occult and divine spell books and talk about all these things. And so I started writing up all these different spells, and I realized that the breadth of the story that we were trying to tell, and the level of simulation or abstraction that we were going for, it's not hard to find rope in Spire. For example, you can go and buy some rope. You probably have rope in your house. You can steal rope from a nearby thing. And also, on a storytelling point of view, we're not hugely interested in where the rope comes from and how much it costs. And there are games which have mechanics for that. And there's games there's a summon rope, I believe, is a spell, and then control rope is a spell as well. And so the level of granularity with which we represented the world left us with a very scant spell book. Left us with we only had about 5 or 6 different things from each school, because because we didn't have the mechanics to represent the things, like it would just be agreed or represented through some other means, or it wasn't interesting enough to warrant doing a spell for. So we ended up rolling the spells into the core mechanics of the class, a bit like Dungeons and Dragons 4th Ed did the same thing. I really like 4th Ed. If you only started playing 2 years ago, you missed a lot of this shit.
Yeah.
But
Yes, I did. I have only personally heard questionably unkind things towards 4th
That's the
edition.
thing. Okay, so yeah, this is a hill on which I'm willing to die.
Yeah, go for it. I want to hear it.
Versions 1, 2, 3.5, and 5 of Dungeons and Dragons are all evolutions of the same game. They take the ideas of going down into a subterranean complex, killing something, taking its shoes, and then coming back up. That's fine, and that is a popular thing. I run Dungeons and Dragons. I've played Dungeons and Dragons. It's a good thing to have around. It's a fun time. It's got a very low barrier to entry as long as you get past all the maths you have to do up front. 4th Ed was a brilliant miniatures combat game. Considering how much of Dungeons and Dragons is fighting, it made it good. It had there was lots of movement. There was lots of the ability to affect the battlefield was baked into it. It was written in terms of ranges were in squares rather than in feet. The idea was that no, you're going to be doing this on a attack map, and this is how it functions. Because you can afford to have a attack map because you're in a dungeon. It's got flagstones which are 5 foot across anyway. And that really worked for me. I loved 4th Ed. I really got into it. I loved GMing it in a way that I never did with 5th Ed. It's with 3.5. If you look at the monster stats for 3.5, like a dragon has access to 27 different spells they can cast. We don't need 27 different spells per dragon. And they shouldn't use the same rules as human spellcasters. It should be anyway. 4th Ed was wonderful. I really liked it, and that was the way. That and 13th Age, which is a sort of a natural evolution of 4th Ed from Jonathan Tweet and Rob Heinze, which is a gorgeous game. They both have your class contains everything, and you pick from those as you go up. So there's no spell books to access. That is simply part of your character, which one makes it much easier to balance things across classes. In terms of because everyone has the same level of choices going up, and so you can say Let's think. 4th Ed was the first edition of D&D where a rogue was as viable a character as a cleric, and one of them's a wizard. One of them's a god wizard who can summon miracles from space and shoot lasers out their hands, and the other guy owns a knife, and they are the same mechanically because they're the same level of import because they've got a player at the table. Anyway, that's my rant over. What was I saying? Yes, junk mages. We ended up rolling things into the class because that just seemed like a more solid way of doing it. We had if we've got ideas for different sort of spells you can do, we'll bring them in with extra advances or little sort of prestige classes, I suppose, in D&D terms, which you can take if you meet the prerequisites. Spire's full of those because it's a really big city and we've got lots of different organizations we want to talk about. Heart, less so. We figured we tried to do some extra advances or some prestige classes, and they all just felt like a reskin of an existing character. But yeah, the one thing which it was really hard to write down, and I don't think we really got it across in the book properly. So my apologies on this. But whenever I play Heart, whenever I run Heart, one thing I always encourage people to say is just if you're a wizard, everything you do is magic. So if you make an evade check as a junk mage, that's you casting a spell to go temporarily invisible or insubstantial. Mechanically, it is exactly the same as someone who's good at dodging. And I think we tried to reinforce this in the junk mage stuff with a lot of their skills which they acquire are referenced as weird tattoos which let them do miraculous things. Mm-hmm. And same with the Blood Witch as well. And so it doesn't matter. You can describe this stuff as spells. You can every single thing you do in a game can be magic. but mechanically, there's no need to say, right, this goes in the magic box. And this is from chapter 7, which is the cool chapter that only the cool classes get to pick from. We'd much rather have all of that minutiae, all these cantrips, all of this stuff, just stick it in, like, just have it as wizardry.
Okay.
Like this, like if you like, what is it? I think there's two over large pistols is one of the junk mages things, and like if you want to have 2 magic missiles, all right. Like we're really into reflavoring stuff. We're really into bringing your own style of things, and so yeah, like any sizable spellbook is going to have a wide variety of things which aren't relevant to any particular person who's looking through it. And I think I'd much rather have a brisk, impactful, shorter selection of spells, and then let magic be something which is strange and which is misunderstood, and which players can make up as they go.
Okay. No, I appreciate that, because I think that's kind of the... I can't say I noticed it too much beforehand, but once it was caught up, I went back and I read it, and I definitely got the idea that, or I appreciated the skill trees and the way that they were set up in the manner of everybody gets to have the same level of importance or skill or, kind of ability to manipulate a situation as any other class, which is
the
nice.
Domains suitably. The domains especially, I think, with that. The domains are like this scene takes place in this domain, so this is important to me. Mm-hmm. And you get to be so Spire has a different set of domains because it's telling a different story, and one of those domains is academic, because we talk a lot about universities and recruitment through that sort of thing. And if you have the academic domain, you are better at fighting in a library than someone without the academic domain, because you're in a library. It's your scene. That should matter to you. That should be important.
As a player, I think as well. It feels like it makes sense as a character, but also it means that as a player, you know where your abilities to shine are.
I don't think it does make sense as a character at all. There's no reason why someone with the academic domain would be better at shooting pistols.
3? Just
he hits the guy with the book. Yeah, that's 3. Yeah,
that's 3.
Before he goes to a secret castle on the moon. Yeah.
That's it. That's its own thing. I have one of the tabletop games I got recently is called Excommunicado, which is built very much inspired by John Wick. It's meant for a GM and 2 players as agents running from stuff, and it's just tiny 3-person game. It'll be interesting. Okay, so that personally clears a lot of things up from. I'm also very interested in 4th edition now, because the idea of
man, have a go. It's good.
I invested so much into terrain and mapping and all kinds of. So they're modular. I have they're basically bricks of medium density, like fiberboard, that are burned and cut into tile chunks that I can build worlds out of. And it kind of gave me a very retro looking, almost Fire Emblem-y combat table. But I invested so much into that, and then when I started getting into other tabletops and things, I realized as a GM there is no, even in 5th edition. So I got into Electric Bastion Land, and I started playing Morkborg and things, and I stopped using a battle map for a lot of these kind of systems. And then I went back to playing 5th edition. It's kind of like the
role-playing equivalent of going to a party and someone's like, "Hey, try this, man!" And then it's kind of a gateway drug, and then you sort of go up to Morkborg. You'd be playing Human-Occupied Landfill next, I imagine.
Human-Occupied Landfill. I'm gonna write that one down.
Oh, that is Human-Occupied Landfill is technically playable. It's a gorgeous game, though. Gorgeous game. But yeah, anyway, sorry, I interrupted you. Continue.
No, you're okay. It's just I went into these games with Bastionland and Morkborg, and then I played Mothership. Mothership is one of my favorites.
Cracking in it, yeah.
What?
Cracking game, isn't it?
Oh yeah, it's brilliantly written. We had some great times during October when I streamed a game of that, but I didn't need a battle map for any of these. They're abstracted enough that they're encouraged to just tell a story at a table. And then I took that and I went back to D&D. Haven't used a battle map since for 5th edition. There's no need to. I can.
It's harder to use a battle map.
Yeah, I can assume all of this.
much like we were talking earlier about the game saying no to people. When you have a map, that's all you can focus on.
Mm-hmm. Exactly,
Um,
and it
yeah.
prolongs the game, especially if you're in like in a real life situation. Then it's somebody has to stand up from one end of the table and they walk over and they're like, all right, here's where my person is. I'm gonna move them over here.
Mhm.
But so the idea of like role-playing games have become far more separated from the table pieces now. Whereas maybe that's where I started getting into Warhammer too, because I love the idea of board games and moving miniatures and things. But this is, it lends itself to a different feeling. So fourth edition
Yes,
having that baked into it and designed for that
absolutely.
is very interesting.
Almost to a fault.
Well,
Uh, that's the thing. Like it's gorgeous, but all the classes. I'm going to argue against my own thing here. All the classes feel the same because all the classes do is do damage, and there's healers and there's defenders and there's etc. But coming from 3.5 way, or like 3.5 and fifth ed are broadly the same game, except that fifth is much better. Having a druid and having a rogue are very different experiences at the table, and in fourth ed they're broadly the same. An awful lot of it is that theater of the mind, that excitement of, oh, okay, I'm doing 2d10 damage and the rogue's doing 2d10 damage, but I'm doing it because I'm going to throw a bear out my sleeve, and the rogue's going to do it because he can teleport behind someone and slash their throat. And yeah, do take a look. Also, be cheap as chips now. I imagine you can get the books for nothing.
Oh, probably.
Yeah.
My dad grew up on. I grew up on 3.5 briefly, and second, but that's the abstraction of like we're gonna take this from a storytelling perspective, and we're not gonna use a map, because I assume that's how. Or there's not even any description for mechanic in it, so that is how it would work for Heart, or how it's designed to work for Heart. It's like don't use maps.
Yeah,
maps
no
are
maps.
unimportant. Which
you
makes
can do a little sketch and point to where things are if you'd like, but no, we don't do distance or anything now.
Which makes sense to how you built, or how you were explaining, like the junk mage or things, where it's like everything is magic, everything you're doing can be magic because you are a mage. Describe it that way. So because you're storytelling, a lot of those things shouldn't matter. So that's a really cool point. This is a personal thing, because as a game master, I am curious, or if you could explain it to me, because it was the weirdest thing for me to understand.
Your qualm.
Yeah, my singular qualm is, how do the supplies work? The supply section baffled me regularly, with the idea that, or at least as I understood it, and maybe I'll throw this at you and you'll say, oh yeah, I remember that, that's good, or no, that's all garbage. I don't know what you were playing.
Go for it.
But the supplies are, there is no currency. It's all based on either bartering based on the value of the items you collect based on the size of their die. Is that approximately what the idea was?
And currency would be included in that. Yeah. So you could have we're not interested in a coin, but say a stolen coin purse could be D8 Haven, and so it is worth D8 thing. You can trade it for goods of D8 value or higher. So we don't talk, and it's the same in Spire. We don't talk about individual units of currency. We're not interested in keeping track. Part of the one of our design ethoses. I've got them up on my wall. Hang on, let's read them. No dead levels. Make stories happen. Oh, it's not here. Oh, I'm lying to you. What a shame. Disregard that. One of my personal ones, which I didn't write down on a mission statement, it's skip to the end. So what we want to do in our games is not necessarily simulate running out of money. What we want to do is give people the opportunity to simulate having run out of money. So the exciting bit is not counting all those coins and say, oh, I've got 6 here, so I can afford to do that, and I can buy X arrows and what have you. But the exciting bit is, all right, I'm in debt, and some angry people are after me because I'm in debt, and so we need to leave now. It just sort of skips all that bit out the middle and jumps to the end. And so money or barter goods or ropes or candles or what have you is a resource exactly the same as your sanity, as the physical integrity of your body, as your reputation, your popularity. We are modeling that resource on the same scale and the same track as all the others. So it can be quite weird, to come into it and be like, but there's no rules for pounds. There's no rules for, like, if I want to go to a shop and buy something, it's like, oh, you can just have it. If it's unimportant, you can just have it. And if it's important, then what we're looking at here is it has the capacity to inflict stress on you. So it can inflict supply stress if it uses up the money you have, or you have to trade something for it which you want to keep. It could also inflict fortune stress because you had to set up a meeting to buy it and you've pissed off people. It could inflict mind stress because you're super worried about how you can afford this and how you can pay this back. And it's what the game is about, is all the different things that can go wrong to you, and becoming broke is just one of those.
Okay. So the idea of, I guess by extension, this comes into kind of a half of a different question, but if I have a system, or sorry, if I have a bag of mushrooms that's like a D6,
Mm-hmm.
and then I'm going to trade those, or sell them or whatever, because they are valued at a D6, that D6 die is both its value counter as well as kind of its quantity, more or less, because you can deteriorate those down a die size.
Yeah, you could bring it down to D4 if you'd like. Yeah.
And then you can go from that, and you can also that's also a capacity to inflict stress. So are you rolling? Are you rolling for a success on the trade deal, and then the failure is the stress inflicted, or how did that?
Mm-hmm.
Is that how you imagine that functioning?
Yeah, broadly. If you're interested in buying something, then you do the trade deal, and if you take stress, it costs you too much money. You had to give up. I say too much. I think it's sort of like what's the system? World of Darkness does it, where you have resources stat, which is not a current game anymore. World of Darkness, it's been, I think, like a while since the last edition even. But you have your resources stat, and you can buy. You can casually access anything from the level below your current one. So if you're level 4, you can just have things that cost resources 3 or more. And if you want something that's level 4, then you can reduce your resources as you liquidate assets, and you can buy that expensive thing. So it's that's more of an abstraction in terms of what you have, but there's still a measure of it. Whereas ours, we don't represent wealth, as it were. There's no you can have plenty of resources. You can have plenty of resources with high dice values, which is what you can carry around with you and what you can potentially trade. But again, I think what we're interested in doing is modeling the stress and modeling the excitement of trying to cut a deal for this thing.
Well, and I think with apologies.
No, it's fine.
I think with the idea of heart, at least from my understanding thematically too, that makes sense, because these are not wealthy people, or traditionally kind of shouldn't be. It doesn't feel like how the game is set up with broken people, or people
doing
winners. Their best. They're trading stuff, or they're trying to get what they need, but it's just kind of what you have on your back that you're playing with.
And also, it's not a game about. It is a game about being like these broken people with not enough resources to go around, but it's not necessarily a game about starving to death because you can't afford dinner.
Yeah.
Like you could certainly have starving to death because that's an interesting thing to happen, because you've become lost, because you've been trapped somewhere, and you're taking blood stress, and you're slowly you're taking resources and blood stress as you run out of supplies, and then you run out of food, and then you start going into starvation. That's a story which you can model, which the mechanics are there for, but generally there's other things I'd rather model, and I think we leave a lot of that up to the GM in terms of what kind of stresses, what kind of fallout they're interested in putting on people.
Okay, very good. That clears up a lot of things, I think, for me. That was really the only spot that I'm like, I don't get it, and maybe I just needed to quantify money so badly that I'm like, why do all of these have these abstract values? Where is my currency? I don't have 20 arrows sitting in my quiver. It didn't none of that connected initially. Okay, so we're coming up a little past, or have just crested past about an hour at this point. A couple more questions for you, but I guess these ones are more towards your personal experience with the game.
All right.
What are you most proud of? Personally, what is the thing that you worked on in Heart that you are most proud of?
Predatory buildings. So there's
The tavern?
Yes, there's the tavern. Yes, the tavern is a predatory building. That's the Last Orders. The library, the Horde, which is a building which seems predatory but is actually illusory. But I really like Last Orders and the idea of a predatory building. It's not something I'd seen before. It seems like a pretty straightforward idea to implement. And like the idea that it's this big pitcher plant and it's horrible and you fall down into the basement and break your legs, and the fact that witches can adopt them, and so like one of the witch advances is you get a little predatory building which follows you around between towns. It's just always been there apparently, and like you can lure cats in and feed it. There's something, yeah, I've not seen that before in fantasy. I think there's something quite charming about the idea of adopting a building which then follows you around and tries to eat your friends.
It's simultaneously some kind of almost a Baba Yaga hut, but also almost a couple steps adjacent to a mimic, but big.
Yes, yeah, I think that's kind of what we did with mimics. Because like we were really interested in taking the iconic monsters from Dungeons and Dragons, but also from folklore in general. I suppose, honestly, like mainly European Greek folklore is kind of the stuff that we grew up with. It's just the stuff which we learned in primary school.
Yeah.
And so having the capacity to reinvent those and talk about like what's the myth underneath this? What are we talking about, and how can we mess it up in some way?
Yeah.
So yes, I'm very happy with them, and I'm also the concept of Zenith abilities. It's the heretic's ability to activate this ability, die a martyr's death. I think that's probably the rule I'm happiest to have written.
That's a phenomenal point actually, because I as soon as I discovered how the Zenith abilities function, I went and I read all of them.
Yeah, really cool, aren't they?
Like,
it's a campaign end.
That's not how that works. What?
Yeah. Kills you.
Yeah,
it's great because they basically drop in traditional role-playing game terms. They drop about 15-20 levels on you at once. They give you this huge amount of narrative control, and the thing with that narrative control is you cannot sustain it. You cannot sustain the level of power which Zeniths give you, and so it's like over an extended campaign. And so we wanted to have the capacity. Like Chris and I are both obsessed with death. I personally am fascinated with it. And the idea of being able to die well, or die for a cause, or die to sell your life dearly, I find fascinating. And so having every character, it's like, no, you're gonna die, and it's gonna be so cool. That's baked into the rules. That's the higher echelon of Heart, and it's always really exciting.
At least, anytime I play D&D, like that's everybody's fear too. Is you go into a combat and you're like, I'm gonna die because of being worn out or killed down by a goblin or anything. But because of Heart being the way that it is, and death being very deliberately a choice, whether that's the GM making the choice or you making the choice, because it is a choice, it's everybody looking at it and saying, here's the most narrative place that we could put this so that you feel good about it. And if you have the skills to be able to do so and do something really cool with it at the same time, why not? Because then you have total control of your character and your character's story from beginning to end, more or less. And that's very neat. We had because I was trying to kind of sample through everything during the one shot that we played, I wanted to get as much experience kind of in a breadth of what Heart had to offer. We got a critical fallout right at the end because I sent them after an angel.
It's a popular target. Yes, they're great, the angels.
The angels are wild.
They're terrifying.
I was not quite into. That was the only combat they had too. That was their experience with combat, as they jumped in against an angel at the very end. And the critical fallout I gave the guy was the one, and I can't remember what it was, but it was The one where you survive by some miraculous means, only to
Chosen, I
reawaken
think, isn't it?
eventually as an angel,
Yeah.
because the heart saved you, kind of thing.
Mm.
And I kind of fast forwarded that. So by the time they killed this angel, and their buddy was dead, and he gets back up and he's fine and stuff, and they take the treasure out of the tomb, and as they're leaving, the heart stops them by turning their friend and putting him right in front of him, and that's where we ended the session,
Mm.
which is loads of fun.
Yeah.
But the fact that death means more in this is very cool, and it's very apparent through the zenith abilities or the critical fallouts, where you're looking. I don't want to say you're looking forward to it, but you kind
No,
of are.
it's a reward. It's
Yeah,
like the
yeah, you
critical
kind of are,
fallouts
because
are. It's like XP. It's like
yeah,
it's like you're being rewarded for playing dangerously, and yeah, like a few people have said like the critical fallouts are what really sold them on Heart, because it's an end game, and like it's so rare to find an exciting end game in role playing games.
that's true.
Certainly from my experience.
It lends to a beginner. As much as this is an advanced game, I think it lends to beginning players as well, because writing an end is hard to anything.
Mm, yeah.
And
And
having at least examples of that strewn throughout the entirety of the book, saying these are the things that can happen to you, this is what's going to drop you eventually,
mm,
is really nice to see, because not only does it give flavor to the game, but it gives a lot of ammunition to say, all right, these are the worst things that could happen to you. Now, as a GM, I can build around that and say,
yeah.
all right, how can we put you in this situation? Which I think is was very satisfying. Let's see, I have my notes here. I had one or two other things that was very Those are the wrong notes. Oh no, my only other note is, hey Grant, are you okay? Because I had to be resent
Okay.
that by my player. So
Okay.
we got that earlier.
Yeah. No. Full disclosure: I suffer from depression. I'm on medication for it. I'm in therapy. It's been an ongoing challenge throughout my life. And you may, yeah, it's like my obsession with death is something which is tied innately to my suicidal impulses, and Heart gives me a means of catharsis in terms of being able to die well and on my own terms and gloriously. I think there's a level of talking about that which lets us, which lets me give some of that to people. I think. Yeah, it's a challenge certainly to get up some days, but
No, that's
we take by.
understandable and relatable. So I appreciate you sharing. Yeah, no. I think overall, I am thrilled to be able to have you on the series. It was a great conversation. I think the last thing, and I think I'm going to ask this to everybody, is on their way out, because I am always looking for new material for the series and for my own top shelf. What's your favorite? Not that you've written, but what's
My
your
favorite.
current favorite tabletop?
Oh, my current favorite. I read a brilliant one called Kingdom recently, where you play sort of 12-foot tall god-blooded nightmares, and then you play your children as you go. It has a really cool art style, really cool world building, and a lovely way of building weapons where you have different materials for the haft and for the blade and for the pommel. But in terms of, because I've not played it yet, so I don't really know how it would go live. But in terms of games that you should own and buy, Siren by McGuay Baker. It is a gorgeous game. I think when did it come out? 2007. So it's been a while.
Okay.
I believe it's still available through the Monthly Games site. It is I've not seen any game which works like this. The core idea is you are a set of people with strange psychic abilities. You wake up in a crash site. You know they're coming for you. Run. And then the game is expressly about running as fast as you can away from problems. I played a game on Saturday. My mate Sharang, ran a game for me and some friends. and it generates these big freewheeling over the top stories. It has really cool player choice, like it's about empowering players to give them the opportunity to pick what goes wrong and how dangerous their powers are. Lovely game, huge recommend.
Oh, that's spectacular. No, I love that. Ooh, I'm actually very excited for that because the idea, I love games that just throw you directly into, all right, ready, set, go. I'm
Yeah.
hugely a fan of roguelike games as far as video games are concerned. It's like, all right, we're gonna start. There's no story, or maybe there is story, but you don't have to have story. We're just here's this situation, navigate it. And the fact that you can play that through 400 times and that could all be different every time is a lot of fun. I like the possibilities involved in that, so that's very cool. Well, neat. I appreciate that. We'll go ahead and, I guess, close things out then. I'll wrap up and let you go. I know it's evening time for you there. It's
Yes, it's
early
20
for
past
me.
5.
I need to go get breakfast at some point.
Oh God, you haven't eaten yet?
No, I had
Oh, good heavens.
a glass of tea.
Get some food in you, man.
Eat PG
You don't want to do an
tips.
interview before breakfast.
I barely woke up in time. I was just like thrown around. Like, oh no, I have to pretend like
I have to put on my good bow tie.
Right. I only have one. So that last session that you watched, and you're like, oh, everybody looks nice. It's like that was the first time I'd ever tied a bow tie.
I don't know how.
I have had one sitting here for a decade, and I have yet to put one on. But thank you so much, Grant. If you would like to plug anything or tell people where people can find you, any upcoming projects, whatever you like.
Plugging things, you can go to GS Howitt at Twitter. I believe my name should be under there somewhere. I'll post about things on there. It's probably the best place to go. If you're interested in playing some more of my games or learning more about Heart and its many source books, which we did as part of the Kickstarter campaign, you can go to rrdgames.com. And I also release one free game every month. So you can get those. Best place to go is, again, rrdgames.com. You can download those. Fill your boots with free games. I don't mind. Maybe give me a little bit of money. Just a little bit of money. And if you think I'm funny, if you want to hear me talk more, you can go to soundcloud.com/Hearty Dice Friends, which is a podcast that I run with my co-author Chris, where we design games on the podcast and sort of just mill around and bump into each other conversationally for about an hour every week, which is it's fairly gentle and it's quite good to fall asleep to, I hear.
Fair enough. No, I'm gonna have to actually check that out then. I've exhausted Chris McDowell's podcast since I think that wrapped.
Oh yeah, no, it's not that level of game design cleverness. Chris got some really stellar guests on and talked in cleverly. The first 100 episodes of Hearty Dice Friends is me wondering what kind of cock an orc would have, and then we sort of mellow out a bit. So yeah.
Okay. I almost need to check it out more now. No, super cool. So, for anybody, not that I am, you'll see me around all the time. So I'm the host of The Top Shelf. If you're just tuning into this for the sake of the interview and Grant, we do new tabletop role-playing game. We play a new tabletop role-playing game every single episode. Play it through, discuss it, go over how it felt, leave some kind of review out into the world so y'all can experience something new. You can find me at Carlman Turner on Twitter, Instagram, whatever. Anybody have any recommendations, always feel free to hit me up. But we will see you in the next episode. Episode 2 of this is going to be Light, which is basically a Destiny clone. It's a first-person shooter translated down into tabletop role-playing, so I'm very excited to see how that is going to feel. But thanks again, guys. We'll talk to you later, and we are out.